Hello again. Many of us were surprised at the swiftness with which those taking part in protests a few weeks back were arrested, brought to trial, and sent to prison. Some were certainly guilty of violence, but most were not, and had either been merely shouting and gesticulating at the police, or even merely posting hasty and ill-judged comments on Facebook and Twitter. These are the kind of offences which in the usual way of things would take months to reach court, and then be dealt with by means of fines or, at worst, suspended sentences. The government, though, made it clear that they expected judges to send people to prison immediately for a substantial length of time for involvement in those disturbances. Since everybody already knew that the prisons in this country were on the verge of a crisis because they were almost completely full, the consequence should have been clear to everybody that this would precipitate an emergency. This duly arrived today and has led to the decision to start releasing real criminals, people who have been convicted of crimes such as robbery with violence, rape, and so on, to make room for those who can best be described as political prisoners. I think it fair to describe them in this way because had it not been for the direct order of politicians, for example the Prime Minister and members of the Cabinet, then these people would not have been sent to prison. They are for the most part minor offenders who would never have ended up in custody. This is not, of course, the first time that our prisons have become full. It's something which happens from time to time quite naturally. But on this occasion it did not happen naturally. It was engineered by the government, who issued direct orders to the judiciary to imprison people involved in the protests rather than giving them the usual nominal sentences they might have received. The grandmother, for instance, who said on a Facebook group that a mosque ought to be blown up and was promptly jailed for 15 months. Or the man who was just the administrator of an online group where some inflammatory comments were made and has been sent to prison because of this. In short, this is a politically created crisis and a terrible portent of what is to come, with politicians overriding the usual judicial process and in effect dictating sentences to the judges. You know, the kind of thing which happens in Russia and China. The Labour government has not yet been in power for 2 months, and yet already it is plain that there is a serious crisis brewing when it comes to freedom of expression, freedom of the judiciary from interference, and a half-dozen other things. Starmer is not a Democrat at heart. He still seems to imagine that he's the director of public prosecutions. Believe me, we've seen nothing yet.